So bullet dynamics are pretty easy to set up and a lot of fun. Let's do something a little more practical and jump into Lightwave Modeler to set this one up. You can use the simple geometric objects like we used just earlier to set up a basic scene. But what we're going to do now is use some of the modeler tools to set up our objects and then put them into layout and animate them with dynamics. So what I'm going to do first is build a simple box. Now I'm going to do this simply, but we can do it a little more advanced if you want, just so that we can get things a little bit faster. I've built out this box in the shape of a domino. We're going to make a little domino scene and make them all fall. I'm going to press N for numeric. And one thing you might not be aware of is that when you're building boxes, you can actually round out their corners. And let me just position this so you can see the corners. There we go. So with this numeric panel open, you can set a radius. So if you increase the radius here, look what happens to those edges. Pretty nice. You can put on smooth edge if you want. Adds a little bit of a bevel in a way. And then you can increase the segments. You only need like 2 or 3. But what happens with that is that you get this very nice rounded corner. Pretty nice. And there's not much more you can do with the radius. You can only go so far simply because of the shape and the amount of geometry there. So I'm just going to go like that. And then we'll press the spacebar to turn off that tool. We'll press Q to get our change surface requester. We'll call this a domino. And I'm going to make these just sort of gray. Now, if you wanted, if you were so inclined, you can use the Boolean functions to cut some holes in there and, set up a number of these with different faces and shapes. You can even image map by putting a picture on one side and a picture on the other. And again, you're going to do all that in the surface editor. So if you set up a domino surface, you would hit texture and then image map and place an image map on there. But we're not having to do that now. We're just going to go smooth. And I'm going to bring my smoothing value down a little bit. And watching my shape up in this corner view here, you can see that if smoothing is too high, it might give us a little bit of an error. So I'm just going to bring it back down just to the point that those edges smooth out. And then we'll look at those corners. We can make them a little bit smoother. That's pretty good. All right. And then we can put a little shine on there. Just give it a little something. A little gloss there. And I think just give it a little bit of color, just maybe a little blue. All right, so no big deal there, just a little bit of a domino. Now, its position in 3D space is pretty important to our dynamics. So I'm going to press F2. What that does is automatically center it, but I don't want the pivot to be right there smack dab in the center. So I centered it so that all axes are 0, 0, 0. They're zeroed out. Pivot is perfectly centered. Now I'm just going to press the T key and holding Control, I'm just going to move this up and rest it on the ground. There, just like that. Spacebar turns off my move tool. So now it's perfectly centered on all axes except the Y, and because of that my pivot is at the base of this domino. So we'll save this out and go to Movies. We'll go to our course content, Objects, and we'll call this Dominoes. And I said that dominoes is plural. You know why? Because we're going to make more. So we're going to layer 2. Layer 1 is a background. And what we're going to do is zoom out in the second layer with our first layer as a background layer. And under the Create tab, you can use a spline draw. And I'm going to click a point here behind it, a point in front. And we're not going to do a bunch here. We'll make a left turn. And maybe we'll come up here and we'll do like a domino question mark. And then I can come back to each one of these points and round them out if I need. We can follow a shape, whatever you want it. Now I'm going to leave it like that because 2 things are going to happen here. This is going to be the path that we're going to make the dominoes clone upon. But it's kind of curved here at the front, so it might give us a little strange position when we start out. So let's press the single quote key. That's 2 over from the L. And that reverses our layers. Then I'm going to come over here to multiply. And under duplicate, there's a more button. Click that, and there's a button called Rail Clone. Select it. Now, I'm going to do this a few times. We'll do automatic and just click OK. Well, you can see that those dominoes are now cloned based on that background curve, and that's great. But look at the way it kind of turns here. That's not going to work too well for us. Dominoes should, of course, be set up perfectly even all the way. So undo, run rail clone again. How about uniform lengths? Well, that's working better, but the problem here is we don't have enough of them. So we'll undo. And if you take a look at the count right there, as soon as this uniform lengths was turned on, we can set a count. Before I do that, try uniform knots. And what happens is that where we had placed points, it puts those clones there. So really what we want is the uniform lengths. And I'm going to say maybe 100. Click oriented so they're evenly spaced, and they'll follow the curve. That can be good or bad. Now that's probably a little too close, but you notice that they orient themselves to the curve. They turn. So that's pretty good. Let me undo. A key fits it in the view. Hit rail clone again. Uncheck this, and let's bring the value down to maybe about 60. So you see how important that orientation is. Now they clone, but they're still all facing the same way. All right, so let's do about 50 and orient them to the path of the curve, and we're good to go. I'm going to reverse layers, cut away that clone. We don't need that curve. And then we're going to go to create, and we're going to make a box, and we need a ground for these to rest on. So if you remember the first video I showed you on dynamics, you need something for them to sit on. I'm going to press my up arrow with my mouse in this view, and then my right arrow, and this will give us just a few segments. Turn off the box tool and press F2 to center, and I can move this over. But pay attention to the ground. By pressing F2, it brought it right down to the 0 axis, so it is now resting beneath the dominoes. Press the Q command, and this is ground, and that is now our surface for the ground. One last thing, in layer 3, we're going to need something for the dominoes to start falling. Okay, so new blank layers, layer 3, hold the shift key, and you can select the background layers for 1 and 2. Here's a ball, and I'm going to hold the control key. Something like that. I'll press F2 to center that out, and I'll press Q and name this ball. And let's make the ball nice and red and smooth and shiny. There we go. I'm going to press F7 to stay even more organized, which is our layers panel. Layer 1, dominoes. Layer 2, double click it. This is ground. And layer 3, double click it, ball. Command S to save, and from the top right drop down, let's send this object to layout. Select the light, and we'll move that out of the way. And it's kind of small, so I'm going to press the left bracket key to change my grid square from 20 meters down to 1 meter. And that way we'll have a little bit more control of everything and a little bit more fun getting these in motion. All right, so here are our dominoes. Here's our ball. Let's move this out of the way. And I'm going to size that down just a little bit. That's a little too big. All right, I'm going to save this scene back in our movies to our course content, scenes, and we'll call this dominoes. All right, so the ball is selected, so in the effects tools, that is going to be a rigid body. Just click on that. Select the ground from the list here, because we just named those in a modeler. The ground is static. What do we make the dominoes? Well, the dominoes are all one object. How are they going to fall independently? Easy, by making them a parts body. The engine will see those and make them fall appropriately. Don't believe me? Well, watch. Okay, so here's our ball. And what's going to happen is that if we push this ball into the dominoes, they should fall, right? Well, there's 0. Let's wind up. We're going to go. We're going to roll that guy back. And you can actually see the dynamics already working. And here's 36, and we're going to roll this forward. Just grabbing the blue handle. But notice how much trouble I'm having? Well, that's because I said it's rigid. It needs to be kinematic. And I'd mentioned that in the previous video. So if I click kinematic now, give this a second, and we'll rewind it. So there's 0. Go to frame 20, and then go to the next frame, which is 36. Look what happens. It's already in place and active. Okay. So if you want to animate something and actually have it work with the dynamic bullet engine, make it kinematic. And that's this one right here. So it's still a collision, but it's a moving collision. So let's rewind, hit the play button, bonk, and it hits it really fast. And now look what's happening. All those other ones are falling down. Okay. So let's work on the settings a bit and see if we can tweak this so that it's not quite as strong. So instead of this winding up so far back and getting so much mass and power going, we're going to spread that out a little bit. We'll rewind. And I also want to stop it right here on the 0 axis. So I'm going to go to this last keyframe and move this back so it just simply taps it, so it doesn't hit it as hard. Boom. And now you can see those don't go flying when that hits it. But we're still having some dominoes fall. It's like somebody blew them over without us noticing. So the front starts just fine, but the back, they're all starting to fall a little bit. So let's save this scene right now. Then let's select these guys and open the item properties for bullet and take a look at the domino settings. Well, right now it's set to volume density. If I change this down to point density, rewind, and hit the play button, they're still falling very nicely, but not standing until I want them to. They're falling on their own, and that's not what we want. We want them to stay put until the other domino falls on top of them. So how can we fix that? We have our type set to parts. The shape is convex pieces by default. You can change this to something like box, and it will look at those as a box, but not quite working for us here just because of the type of shape. You can also change it to something like mesh, and number one, that's going to calculate more, but it might not still give us the right look we want. You'll see they're all going to start jumping all over the place. So you can see, because of those shapes, the way the collisions work, that they're hitting the ground. They're instantly starting to activate and react with the static ground. They're colliding immediately from the start. So that's not at all what we want to do. See that? There you go. They're just all starting to collide right away. Kind of a nice idea if you want to make something look like it, the ground suddenly became electric and pop those up. So that's not what we want. We're going to keep this with convex pieces. Where we really need to change this is in the activation. Earlier I had shown you that we could say activate on last key, but the problem is we don't have a last key. These are individual parts. So what you want to do, instead of starting active, start sleeping. Start the collisions sleeping. If you hit the play button, notice that these other dominoes now are no longer falling until the other domino hits them on top. Nice little bounce at the end too. So works really, really well. Very simple to set up. Very nice. Now, you can think of some of the possibilities of this, of buildings collapsing if you're doing a deconstruction of something. You can blow apart logos. You can very easily put this into use for medical animations. Even bookshelves, doing a character animation, things falling off a shelf. Any kind of possible collision or colliding objects. That's what I was trying to say. Two words in once, colliding. I made up a new word. Colliding or collision, very easy to set up. And of course you can put your cameras on here and do some fun animation as well. Getting down inside here and really doing something unique. One more thing I should point out is that a while ago we had done a video course on setting up dynamics with a craps table. We built a craps table and we put some dynamics on there using the old Lightwave Dynamics engine. Well, that would be something to revisit with bullet dynamics. And basically you're taking a kinematic object like this ball and you're throwing dice, and then the dice are coming and rolling down the craps table. It's pretty cool stuff. So let's go ahead and save this scene. Save scene as Dominos is fine. We'll save it as the same one, and you can load that up and take a look. Let's do one more dynamics setup, and then we'll move on to motion graphics.